The glass clinked. That's all it took. My grandma raised her champagne flute at the center of a long table covered in overpriced food I didn't order, surrounded by people I wasn't sure I even liked. The clink cut through the noise, and everyone went quiet, like she'd tapped a mic on a press podium. And then she smiled at me. To Naomi, she said warm and proud, for everything she's accomplished in the Navy, and for how wisely she's handled the trust fund I set up for her. I couldn't be more proud of how she's managed that $3.5 million. I didn't say anything, not because I was being modest, not because I was overcome with emotion. No, I didn't say anything because I had no idea what the hell she was talking about. $3. $5. $5 million. I sat there in my officer's dress uniform, blinking, holding a glass of wine I hadn't touched while my brain screamed the same sentence on a loop. What trust fund? Everyone else froze for a second, too. Just a beat of silence like the room needed to reboot. Then the noise picked back up way too casual. My dad forced a laugh. My mom did that tight smile she pulls when a waiter brings the wrong order, but she still wants to look like a good tipper. My sister Mallory raised her glass like nothing weird had just been said, and went back to talking to her boyfriend, the one who only speaks in crypto metaphors. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I was trying to remember if I'd ever heard the words trust fund in my life, in any context other than TV. I'd spent the past decade budgeting down to the last grocery dollar, dodging student loan reminders, like they were debt collectors from the 1800s, and skipping dental work because maybe next year. The only $3 million I'd ever seen was the number of emails in my Navy inbox. I looked at my parents. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. My dad raised his eyebrows like he was waiting to see how I'd react, like I was a grenade he'd just rolled onto the table. The rest of dinner blurred. People talked. I nodded. Someone asked about my deployment. I answered on autopilot. My sister showed off her new watch, which I'm pretty sure cost more than my car. At one point, the waiter brought a dessert menu. I could have been on Mars. When it finally ended and we were outside saying goodbye, Grandma hugged me, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "We'll talk soon, sweetheart. You've made me so proud." My mom's hand landed on my shoulder immediately after like she was tagging herself in. "We'll handle it," she said to Grandma. "Naomi has a lot on her plate. We'll go over everything." Grandma gave her a look, slight but sharp, then got in her car. I turned to my parents. "I'm riding with you." My dad laughed like I was joking. "You've got your own place to get back to, right? We'll talk later this week." "No," I said. "We're talking tonight." My mom opened her mouth, saw my face, and shut it again. She told my dad to let my brother Jason take the other car. He barely looked up from his phone, muttered something about this being so extra, and walked off. The drive to New Jersey felt like it lasted 6 months. No music, no small talk. Just my dad tapping the steering wheel, and my mom pretending the GPS voice was interesting. I stared at the back of their heads, and finally said, "How long have you known about that money, Silence?" My mom shifted like her seat got hotter. Nimishki said, "This isn't the time." How long my dad exhaled through his nose. "Since you were born," he said. I waited. "Mom set it up when you were a baby," he continued. "It was always meant for your future. You know how she is always planning ahead." "No," I said. "I don't know, because nobody told me. I found out 30 seconds before dessert." My mom turned around in her seat. "You were a child. It was complicated. It wasn't something you needed to worry about growing up." "I'm 30, I said. "I've been living like a broke student for a decade. I've taken out loans, skipped medical appointments, moved 5 times to chase affordable rent, and you didn't think I needed to worry about $3.5 million. There was another long pause. My dad pulled into their driveway like the conversation wasn't happening. The same house I grew up in suddenly looked like a crime scene. Inside, he headed for the kitchen like he always did. I stood in the doorway. "Sit," I said. He hesitated, then pulled out a chair. My mom stayed standing with her arms crossed like she was the one holding the moral high ground. Was there a trust fund, I asked. Yes, my dad said. Were you in charge of it until I turned 25? Yes. Is the total supposed to be $3? 5 million? It's around that, my mom said. Markets go up and down. It's not that simple. Where is it? They didn't answer. My dad rubbed his forehead like the numbers were giving him a headache. My mom finally sat down. It's not all there anymore, she said. What does that mean? We used some of it, my dad said. We invested for the family. I laughed. It sounded ugly. For the family? What, like stocks? For Mallory, my mom said sharply. To help her get on her feet. To pay for school. To help with the startup when the bank froze your father's bonus. We didn't waste it. We used it where it was needed, without telling me. You wouldn't have understood. You never gave me the chance. We always planned to make it right, my dad said. You weren't stealing, I said. You were borrowing. Yes, my mom said, like she was relieved I finally got it. Then why did you never mention it? Neither of them answered. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the strong one in the family, the one who gets left behind while others are rescued, leave a comment. I want to hear your story. And if you're into real stories about family power and the kind of revenge that doesn't need yelling to be brutal, go ahead and subscribe. You're in the right place. My brother Jason walked into the hallway with a bag of chips. Like this was a normal Tuesday. I looked him straight in the eye. Did you know about the money? He paused. I knew Grandma set something up. I didn't know it was all yours. You knew they were using it. He shrugged. Dad said it was for all of us if my company took off. My mom looked ready to throw something. I didn't say another word. I walked out the door into the cold, straight to the train back to my apartment. My inbox had 10 unread emails. My rent was due in 5 days. And for the first time in years, I wasn't ashamed of being broke. I was furious. The train jolted as it pulled into Brooklyn, but I barely noticed. I sat there gripping the edge of my seat, eyes locked on the reflection in the dark window, trying to figure out when exactly I became the idiot in my own life. I'd blamed myself for everything, for not having enough, for struggling, for always feeling 2 steps behind everyone else. Now I knew why. They'd let me sink, told me it was character building, and called it love. I didn't sleep that night. My phone kept lighting up with texts from my mom, all variations of, "We didn't mean to hurt you. Please, let's talk calmly." Then one from Jason. "You're blowing this out of proportion." And finally my dad, which just said, "It's more complicated than you think." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sat on my living room floor in my Navy-issued sweats, surrounded by a half-eaten sandwich, old pay stubs, and my laptop, and typed into Google like I was defusing a bomb. Can parents legally use a trust fund without the beneficiary's consent? How to find out where your trust fund went. Financial abuse in families. What I found was horrifying and weirdly familiar. Threads of people who had their inheritance rerouted to fund someone else's dream. Parents who borrowed money they never intended to return. Trustees who used legal gray areas to justify screwing their own kids. The stories didn't shock me as much as they should have. I just kept nodding, like I'd walked into a room where everyone was already mid-conversation. By morning, I had a new tab open, Forensic Accountant, New York City. It was the most aggressive move I'd made in years that didn't involve classified intel. I didn't tell anyone at work. What was I supposed to say? "Hey sir, quick update, I might be the unknowing victim of a 7-figure family heist." No thanks. I compartmentalized like I always had. Uniform on, hair tight, voice steady. But every spare second I wasn't in uniform, I was digging. 3 days later, I called my grandma. She picked up on the second ring. "Naomi, darling. Everything all right?" "No," I said. "Not really. Can we talk about the trust fund?" There was a pause that felt like someone vacuumed all the air out of the room. "I was wondering when you might ask," she said. Yes, of course. Tell me everything. I told her. Not just what happened at dinner, but what my parents admitted, what Jason said, the complete blank space of knowledge I had my entire adult life, while everyone else apparently moved money around with my name on it. She didn't interrupt. At some point, I realized I'd started pacing my apartment, still in uniform, boots on. When I finished, she spoke so quietly, I had to sit down. I'm going to send you everything I still have. I kept physical copies years ago. Your father stopped forwarding statements a while back, said he was moving them to a digital system. I was naive. You weren't the only one, I said. I trusted people who didn't deserve it. That's on me, but I won't make that mistake again. An hour later, her email landed in my inbox with 12 attached PDFs. Scans of trust documents, initial funding statements, account growth records. One page had my full name in clean black ink across the top, above words like irrevocable and sole beneficiary. Another showed a balance of over $3.2 million 3 years ago. 3 years ago. The date made my stomach drop. 3 years ago, I was living in a moldy studio apartment with no AC brushing off chest pain because I couldn't afford the urgent care copay, while they were bleeding the account dry and smiling at me across dinner tables. I printed the key pages at the corner bodega and spread them out on my kitchen table like evidence. Then I opened a notebook and started writing. Not just the numbers, but the feelings. Angry, stupid, used, embarrassed. And something else I hadn't felt in a long time clear. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't failed. I'd been set up to survive, not succeed. They didn't think I'd ever question it because I didn't grow up entitled. I grew up loyal. That night, my grandma called back. There's someone I want you to meet, she said. Her name is Lauren Kim. She's a forensic accountant. She doesn't take many private clients, but I told her what's going on. She's willing to talk to you. I said yes without hesitation. 2 days later, I sat across from Lauren in her Manhattan office. She wore a blazer so sharp, it looked like it had a security clearance. She didn't do small talk. She looked at my folder, my messy handwritten notes, and the scans from my grandma and said, "Okay, let's see what they thought you wouldn't." She underlined, circled, and marked up every page like she was prepping for a courtroom cross-exam. When she spoke, it was clear and brutal. This trust was yours. Legally, morally, financially. They had one job protected until you were old enough. Instead, they treated it like their personal checking account. I swallowed hard. Can we prove that? We already can, she said. The only question is, how far do you want to take it? I looked her in the eye. As far as I have to. She nodded, like that was the only answer she'd accept anyway, and flipped to a blank page. Good. Then let's find out exactly what they did and where your money went. She uncapped her pen, and I finally exhaled. Lauren handed me a copy of the trust agreement, this time printed and highlighted, and told me to keep it somewhere safe and separate from any shared family accounts. I didn't even blink at the suggestion. My bank account didn't see much family traffic these days, unless you count birthday Venmos from Grandma. The next morning, I sat in the mess hall on base, eating oatmeal that could legally be classified as drywall paste, and thinking about the first time my future got quietly derailed. Senior year of high school. I was 17, sitting at the kitchen table with a FAFSA application open in front of me. I'd already been accepted to a state university. Not my dream school, but solid, affordable, and close enough to make sense. All I needed was to file the paperwork. But my parents didn't sign. First, they said they were too busy. Then it was too confusing. Then my dad said he'd talk to a financial advisor because he didn't want me taking out loans like a sucker. The deadline passed. I asked again. My mom said we make too much for you to qualify anyway. Which was a lie. A big one. But I didn't know that then. I thought I'd messed up. Maybe I waited too long. Maybe it really was my fault. So I gave up on school and started looking for work. My guidance counselor called me in and asked why I hadn't registered for orientation. I told her it didn't work out. She looked at me like I'd said I was joining a cult. 2 weeks later, I walked into a Navy recruiter's office. They didn't ask for my FAFSA. They asked if I could swim if I'd ever been arrested, and if I had any visible tattoos. I passed the ASVAB, passed the physical, and a month later, I was shipped off to Great Lakes, Illinois with a duffel bag, a pair of boots, and zero idea what I'd just signed up for. Boot camp was the first time in my life I ever had 3 meals a day guaranteed, the first time I had a bed that no one else claimed, the first time I felt like effort actually got noticed. No one cared where I went to high school. No one asked who my parents were. You performed or you didn't. I got good at it. I rose fast, learned faster. Intelligence fit me in a way school never had, not because I wasn't smart, but because finally the rules were clear. You didn't get ahead by being the favorite. You got ahead by being better. I didn't talk to Mallory much during those early years. She was busy finding herself, which somehow always involved a passport, a yoga mat, and a new business idea every quarter. 1 month, it was Eco Lip Balm. The next, it was a startup for subscription boxes full of curated incense and hand-woven scarves. My parents posted about all of it like she was the next Jeff Bezos with a ring light. I never once resented her for it. I just assumed we lived in different worlds. She got support. I got discipline. It was what it was. Except now I knew it wasn't just emotional favoritism. It was financial. I'd been the budget cut, the collateral, the disposable sibling who could figure it out while they funneled my future into Mallory's startup graveyard. Lauren called 2 days later with her voice clipped and focused. They didn't just pull from the trust occasionally. It's a pattern. I've mapped 5 transfers to your sister's LLC, 1 to a real estate holding account that owns your parents' vacation cabin, and a bunch more masked as reimbursements and family consulting fees. She sent me the spreadsheet. It was color-coded like a rainbow of betrayal, red for unauthorized withdrawals, orange for indirect transfers, yellow for anything disguised as business activity. The whole thing looked like someone had used my life savings to decorate a luxury Pinterest board. At the bottom was a single line that made my stomach flip. Evelyn Future Leaders Grant, $120,000. What is that? I asked her. She cleared her throat. It's a fake scholarship fund. On paper, it looks like a grant from your trust to support young entrepreneurs, but the only recipient is your sister. Of course it was. They didn't even try to hide it. They just gave it a fancy name and slapped a mission statement on it, like that turned theft into philanthropy. I sat on my couch and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The worst part wasn't the money. It was knowing they'd written me off. That they saw my success in the Navy as a reason not to help, but as permission to take. Like being competent meant I didn't deserve anything more. That night I pulled out my old Navy notebooks and started treating the whole situation like a threat assessment. Key players, timeline, motives, weak points. I wasn't the angry daughter anymore. I was the officer who'd been lied to, who had the receipts, and who was building a case. I wrote Mallory's name at the top of one page and underlined it. Next step, find out exactly what she knew and when she knew it. I booked a flight to Texas for the weekend. I knocked on Mallory's door in Austin like I wasn't about to interrogate my own sister. She opened it with sunglasses on, even though we were indoors. The apartment was big, sleek, and filled with mid-century furniture she definitely didn't thrift. It smelled like essential oils and denial. "Oh my God," she said, dragging out the God, like I was a long-lost cousin. "You should have told me you were coming. I would have had oat milk." "I didn't come for oat milk. I need to talk to you about the trust." She froze for half a second. Just long enough. Mallory was always the charming one. She smiled through punishment, flirted out of parking tickets, cried strategically. She had the ability to make everyone think she was just a little helpless, like a bird with a credit card. "What about it?" she said, walking to the kitchen island and grabbing a glass of green juice that looked like regret. "You knew I said. You knew the money was mine. You took it anyway." She looked down like this was a scene she had already rehearsed. I didn't take it. Mom and Dad said it was for the family. The family, I repeated. So, your startup, your apartment, your yoga retreat in Tulum. That was all for the family. I never saw it like that, she said quickly. I thought you were fine. You had the Navy. You didn't need anything. There it was. That sentence, the one they all used. You didn't need anything. Because being functional meant being available. Because being independent meant being ignored. Because if I wasn't actively drowning, I was a resource, not a person. You could have asked, I said. You could have told me. But you stayed quiet while they bled it dry. I didn't know how much it was, she said. I didn't know it was all yours. Dad made it sound like it was a shared thing. Like Grandma set it up for everyone. She didn't. I know that now. I looked around. Designer art on the wall. A velvet couch no one sat on. Candles and jars with French labels. My name wasn't on any of it, but my money was. You got help, I said. You always did. I was never mad about that, but I didn't know you were getting help from me. I didn't mean for it to be like this, she said softly. You didn't stop it either. I walked out. She didn't follow. Back in New York, Lauren had already pulled more records. The spreadsheet was no longer a spreadsheet. It was a wall of war crimes. Over $2.7 million had been moved or withdrawn in various forms. Grants, reimbursements, investments, family, administrative expenses. All of it traceable. All of it sitting in LLCs tied to my parents or Mallory. One transfer had gone to pay off the mortgage on their vacation home in Lake George. Another had covered consulting fees to my father that conveniently matched the tuition payments for Mallory's grad school. Lauren pointed to a pattern. They set up shells, she said. Fake entities, paper names, but every trail leads back to them. She didn't sound angry. She sounded clinical. That made it worse. It's not just unethical, she added. It's illegal. You're the named beneficiary. They were trustees. They violated fiduciary duty on multiple levels. I nodded. I didn't need a law degree to know I'd been robbed by people who sent me birthday cards with Bible verses in them. What happens if we go forward? I asked. Lauren laid it out, calm and clear. Demand letter first, then potential civil suit, possible restitution, removal of my parents as trustees, maybe tax investigations if we flagged enough irregularities. You'll need a lawyer, she said. I can recommend one. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the trust agreement in one hand and my rent notice in the other. I hadn't paid off my loans. I didn't own anything but a car that was more rust than metal. I had worked every day of my adult life while someone else built a lifestyle on top of my silence. I picked up the phone and called Grandma. Do it, she said. Whatever you need, I'll back you. I called Lauren the next morning and told her to proceed. Within 48 hours, I was sitting in a midtown office with Daniel Marks, a lawyer with a face like a tax return and a voice that could calm a forest fire. He reviewed everything. Quiet, efficient, surgical. Your parents were legally responsible for acting in your best interest, he said. They didn't. That's breach of trust, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly fraud depending on the extent of false documentation. He looked at me. We can give them a chance to settle this cleanly. Or we go to court. Send the letter, I said. Let's see what they do when it's in writing. Daniel nodded. Let's make them read what they did in black and white. Daniel sent the letter on a Tuesday. Certified mail email, full legal header. 10 pages of facts that didn't need adjectives. The amount taken, the timeline, the role they were legally obligated to play, and how they failed at every step. At the end, we offered 2 options. Return the money or come to the table with a legitimate repayment plan backed by assets. No drama, no threats, just math and law. They had 10 business days to respond. They waited until day 9. My dad replied with a Word document attached to an email titled, Let's Talk Like a Family. The document was 3 pages of polished nothing. It danced around the facts, offered vague regret. blamed a difficult financial time and unrealistic expectations, and ended with a line that made Daniel snort out loud. "We hope Naomi will reflect on how much we've supported her over the years and consider resolving this privately." I told Daniel to reject it. No edits, no counter. He nodded and said, "They're still trying to control the terms. It's what people like this do. They bet on your discomfort, outlasting their shame." Then he closed the laptop and asked me the question Lauren had asked weeks ago. "How far are you willing to go?" "All the way," I said. "I've already spent years being quiet." We filed suit the next week. My parents went silent, probably hoping I'd flinch. Mallory, however, did not. She texted me a block of gray bubbles that included phrases like, "I didn't ask for any of this. Why are you turning on your own family? And this is why they never trusted you with anything growing up." I didn't respond. She followed up with a voice note that I didn't open. Just seeing her name on my screen made my stomach twist. It wasn't guilt. It was something sharper. Like realizing the person you thought was just naive was actually complicit. Lauren called the next day with more updates. "Your sister's LLC has no revenue," she said. "No activity, no tax filings." It was a shell from the start. The money went in and out, used to pay rent fund personal trips, make luxury purchases. None of it was business. She paused. And she had to sign documents to receive those grants. She knew exactly what they were doing. I closed my eyes and rubbed my forehead. I'd wanted to believe Mallory was just floating clueless, spoiled, but not strategic. But she signed her name. Multiple times. She filled out fake grant applications to move money from a trust fund she knew she didn't own. She played innocent because she knew that's what people expected of her. And I let her. Daniel's office scheduled depositions. My parents tried to delay them. Then they filed a motion claiming emotional distress, like being sued by your own daughter after stealing millions is somehow a civil rights violation. Daniel shredded it. Their motion got denied. The judge scheduled a preliminary hearing. The night before, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the first time I realized my parents saw me as the sturdy one. I was 10. Mallory broke a vase and I got blamed for not watching her. I remember my dad saying, "She's more sensitive than you. You have to be stronger." That was the blueprint. Strong meant quiet. Strong meant less. Strong meant you'll understand when you're older, which turned into you should be grateful we gave you anything. At the hearing, the judge was a woman in her 60s who didn't smile once. She listened. She asked direct questions. She made notes with a mechanical pencil. When Daniel outlined our case, she didn't interrupt once. When their lawyer, some guy with slick hair and a nervous throat-clearing habit, tried to downplay the size of the trust, she cut him off. "The size isn't the point," she said. "The misappropriation is. They tried to offer a settlement $500,000 over 10 years. No interest. With an NDA. Daniel didn't even ask me. He just turned it down flat. They followed up with another offer, $750,000. Same gag order. Still insulting. I asked Daniel if I could send the next response myself. He said yes. I wrote one sentence, "Return what you took with interest, or face the consequences you created." No signature, no closings, just that. 3 days later, my parents' lawyer sent a message saying Mallory was willing to testify if subpoenaed, but asked if we could avoid turning this into a circus. It wasn't a circus. It was a crime scene. And she had walked right through it in heels she bought with my name. The part that finally broke whatever hope I had left wasn't a dollar amount. It was a comment from my grandma while we were reviewing more paperwork together at her kitchen table. She was quiet, flipping through printouts, when she said almost to herself, "Your father did something like this to my sister once." I didn't want to believe her. I looked up. "What?" She didn't flinch. "Years ago, after my parents died. My sister was supposed to get a portion of the estate. Your father was helping with the distribution. Then she said the taxes wiped her part out. She never saw a statement. Never saw a dime." I told myself she was just bitter. I sat back in my chair, not surprised. Just tired. That's why you kept copies of everything, isn't it? She nodded. Eventually, yes, but not soon enough. It wasn't just about me. It never had been. My case was just the latest version of a script they'd run before. I was the military-grade upgrade to a family tradition of rerouting money through silence and guilt. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. So I started making calls. I called my great-uncle's widow, who told me she always suspected something fishy after her late husband's small business was liquidated by my father as executor. I called my dad's youngest sister, my Aunt Becky, who had stopped coming to family gatherings a decade ago. She picked up after one ring. "I've been waiting years for someone else in this family to ask what happened," she said. We talked for an hour. She told me about the inheritance she never received, about the way my parents handled her paperwork, about how every time she asked questions she was treated like the problem, accused of being divisive, dramatic, ungrateful. So she stopped asking and disappeared. "You're not crazy," she told me, "and you're not wrong. You just weren't supposed to look behind the curtain." That line stayed with me. Not supposed to look. That was the whole strategy. Keep Naomi busy, keep her proud, keep her responsible, and she won't look. She won't ask. She'll assume the struggle is normal. She'll wear it like a badge. Until one day, a glass clinks, and a number hits the air, and the curtain rips itself down. Daniel and Lauren were now in full offense mode. They compiled a full timeline: the trust creation, the legal terms, the withdrawals, the shell entities, the fake grant, the signed applications, the personal purchases coded as family expenses. It was spreadsheet hell, but it was airtight. Meanwhile, I went to work like nothing was happening. Uniform pressed, briefings reviewed, chain of command respected. No one asked questions because I didn't leave space for any. Lauren flagged another transfer, this one labeled Evelyn Family Wellness Fund. It was used to cover tuition for my cousin's private school. Another one was tagged as a caretaker stipend that had paid off the lease on my dad's second car. They were creative, I'll give them that. Not subtle, but creative. We had a full report drafted by the end of the week. It read like a forensic crime thriller: trust violation, breach of fiduciary duty, financial misappropriation, tax fraud exposure. The final number diverted just under $2.75 million. My parents had officially taken more than I'd ever earned in a lifetime of service, and they were still framing it as a misunderstanding. They'd always talked about doing what's best for the family, but what they meant was protecting their version of it. The version where Mallory could dream as big as she wanted, and I could work as hard as they needed. That weekend, I met with Lauren and Daniel at his office to finalize next steps. We were preparing discovery requests and pulling backup documentation for anything we might need in court. The energy wasn't emotional, it was methodical. At one point, Daniel leaned back in his chair and said, "Do you want to go public with this?" "What do you mean?" "Once we file the full complaint, it becomes public record. Names, numbers, everything. That's part of the pressure. Some clients don't want that. Others want the exposure." I didn't answer right away. I thought about Mallory's apartment, her face in the mirror. That wasn't hers to buy the silent expectation that I'd keep being the strong one, the one who wouldn't embarrass anyone, the one who wouldn't make a scene. "Yeah," I said. "Let it be public." If they wanted privacy, they could have acted like people worth protecting. He nodded, scribbled something down, and said, "All right. Let's finish the filing," and just like that, the version of me who used to apologize for being upset got quietly buried under the paperwork. The demand letter went out on a Friday morning, timed so they'd have the whole weekend to stew in it. It was direct, fully documented, and legally unambiguous. Return the full $2.75 million, plus interest, step down as trustees, and stop treating my name like a family debit card. No threats, no emotion. Just a deadline and the weight of their choices in writing. For 3 days, no one responded. Not a single word from my parents. Not even a reaction text from Mallory, which honestly was more unsettling than anything she could have sent. Then on Monday at 8:04 a.m., I got an email from my father. Subject line, "Let's sit down, just the three of us." It was dressed up in the civility, full of sentences like, "We never intended to hurt you." This got out of hand, and the all-time classic, "Surely there's a way to resolve this without court." They still thought this was about keeping it quiet. I forwarded it to Daniel and Lauren. She replied instantly, "They want to get you back in the emotional loop. Don't go alone. Don't let them steer the conversation. Document everything." Instead of writing back, I texted my father one sentence. "We can talk Sunday, 11 a.m. Cafe Rutherford. Public. Neutral. No surprises." He replied an hour later. "Fine." I told my grandma I was going. She didn't hesitate. "I'll be there," she said. "Not to speak, just to sit next to you." I didn't argue. Sunday morning came fast. I didn't wear anything dramatic, just a dark sweater and jeans, something that said, "I'm not here to perform, but I'm not here to fold either." I arrived 10 minutes early and got a table by the window. My grandma showed up right after, elegant as always, in a pressed blouse and pearl earrings. She didn't say much, just kissed my cheek and sat down. At 11:05, my parents walked in. My mom smiled like she was hosting a dinner party. My dad gave a stiff nod like this was some awkward scheduling mix-up and not a financial reckoning. Neither of them acknowledged Grandma sitting beside me. They sat down across from us. "We appreciate you meeting us," my dad said. My mom leaned forward, hands folded like a guidance counselor, about to offer vague life advice. "We feel awful about how this has escalated." I didn't say anything. My dad tried again. "Naomi, this got out of proportion. We understand that you're upset." "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm here for clarity and resolution." My mom exhaled. "We made decisions under pressure. Mallory was struggling. The market was unstable. We always intended to make things right. With what money I asked. You drained the trust. You used it to fund her business, pay off mortgages, buy a second car, cover tuition that wasn't mine. You moved money through fake entities and called it family support. Then you lied about it for years. What part of that was going to fix itself?" They didn't answer. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were the highlighted documents. Lauren and Daniel had prepared trust agreement transfer records, shell company filings, all with their signatures. I didn't need to explain a thing. The paper spoke fluently. My dad opened it. His jaw clenched. My mom didn't touch it. "You were never supposed to see this," she said, quiet but sharp. I raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe don't leave a paper trail next time." My dad shifted uncomfortably. "Naomi, we did what we had to do for this family. You've always been strong. You had a career. You were doing fine." "Fine," I said. I took out student loans I didn't need to. I skipped dentist appointments. I turned down buying a secondhand laptop because I didn't have enough left over after rent. Meanwhile, you were wiring 6 figures to Mallory's business account, like it was monopoly money. You don't understand the pressure we were under." My mom snapped. "You don't understand what pressure I was under," I said. "You chose to watch me struggle, then convinced yourselves that made you better parents." "Would you really drag your whole family through court?" my dad asked. Trying a different tone now, something between disappointment and threat. I looked at my grandma. She looked right back at me, completely steady. "I didn't drag anyone," I said. "You walked into this. I'm just showing you the map." My mom's voice dropped. "So what do you want? You want us to grovel?" "No. I want you to take responsibility, and then I want you out of my finances forever." I stood up. Grandma stood with me. "You have the offer. You know what's coming if you ignore it. The rest is your call." As I walked out, my dad called after me. "This is going to hurt you too." I didn't turn around, didn't say anything. I just stepped into the cold, let the wind hit my face, and felt something I hadn't felt in years unbothered. The courthouse was colder than I expected, and louder. People forget court isn't some cinematic whisper chamber. It's busy. Fluorescent lights humming, phones vibrating in people's pockets. Attorneys speed-walking like caffeine was part of their retainer fee. I sat outside the hearing room in a navy blue blazer, holding a folder that felt heavier than it should, even though I knew most of its weight was paper. Daniel arrived precisely on time, calm as ever. Lauren followed with her tablet, and that permanent look, like she was 5 steps ahead of any excuse the defense might try. My parents were already inside. They didn't acknowledge me when we walked in. My mom stared down at the table like she was trying to find sympathy between the wood grain. My dad had that overly professional face people wear when they know they're wrong, but want to pretend they're in control. Mallory sat in the back, no eye contact. The judge was brisk, late 50s, maybe early 60s, with a tone that could slice concrete. She wasn't here for family drama. She was here for facts, and she made that clear before anyone said a word. Daniel opened with the foundation the trust was created when I was a child named solely for me, with my parents as trustees. He laid out the duty they had the standard of care they were required to meet, and every document proving they violated it. He didn't yell. He didn't grandstand. He just laid the truth out like receipts on a conference table. Then came the exhibit list. Bank statements showing transfers labeled as wellness funds that paid for vacation homes. Payments to LLCs owned by my father that lined up exactly with Mallory's tuition due dates. Email records with my parents signing off on grants, with no oversight or structure, just money flowing out of my future like water. The judge listened, took notes, asked a few pointed questions, but gave away nothing. When it was time for the defense, their lawyer tried the soft sympathy route. He talked about how the family was going through financial hardship, how the parents were just trying to balance opportunity between their children, and how this dispute had been emotionally devastating for all involved. The judge didn't flinch. Then they tried to pivot. Naomi benefited from the household. She had a roof over her head. She went to public school. She ate food paid for, in part with family income that came from those same resources. Lauren leaned over and whispered, "That's like robbing someone's bank account and saying they should be grateful you paid for their birthday cake." Then it was my turn. Daniel walked me through everything on the record. I answered clearly, no dramatics. Just what I knew when I knew it and how I found out. I explained how I lived paycheck to paycheck, skipped medical care, took on debt, and served in uniform, while the money meant for me funded someone else's lifestyle. When he asked how I felt when I found out, I didn't go for tears. I felt stupid, I said, and used, and angry that I had to be here in a courtroom explaining why stealing from me wasn't okay just because they raised me. The judge nodded but didn't respond. She was still writing. Then Grandma took the stand. She was composed. Not warm, not bitter, just measured. She confirmed she had set up the trust specifically for me, with the expectation that I would receive it fully upon reaching age 25. She confirmed she had never approved any alternate use. She confirmed my parents stopped forwarding statements and told her they were digitizing the process. Daniel asked, "Did you ever authorize funds to be spent on Naomi's sister?" Grandma didn't even blink. Never. Then Lauren went up with her exhibits. Color-coded charts, digital overlays of transfers, a flowchart that showed how $2.75 million moved through a maze of excuses into very specific hands. The room stayed quiet, aside from the sound of her stylus tapping the screen. Finally, the judge asked Mallory to take the stand. She looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Under oath, she admitted to signing paperwork that claimed she was the recipient of grants. She admitted she didn't ask where the money came from. She admitted my dad told her more than once, "Naomi doesn't need it, she's set." She cried a little, but it wasn't the sobbing kind. It was the quiet, sharp kind. The kind you let out when you realize the defense you've always believed I didn't know doesn't hold up under oath. After she stepped down, the judge called a recess to review everything. We stepped into the hallway, and Daniel turned to me. No matter what she says next, they don't get to rewrite what just happened. I didn't answer. I looked at my parents across the lobby. My mom leaned against the wall like she'd been hit with a slow-moving truck. My dad stood perfectly still, arms crossed, probably still thinking this would blow over if they just stayed quiet long enough. It wouldn't. It already hadn't. The judge came back after the recess holding a printed ruling. She didn't waste time, didn't build suspense. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and started reading with the same tone someone might use to recite a grocery list. Her words weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. She found that my parents as trustees of the fund had willfully breached their fiduciary duty, engaged in unauthorized disbursement of trust assets, and intentionally misrepresented the use and structure of those funds for personal and family gain. She cited the documentation, the testimony, the grant money that had only one beneficiary, the shell LLCs, and the fake expense categories. She said their actions showed not just negligence, but knowledge of wrongdoing, and then she ordered them to repay the full amount, $2.75 million plus interest, within 120 days. They were also immediately removed as trustees permanently barred from acting in that role again for any related or future trusts. She authorized liens on their properties and access to personal accounts to begin recovering assets. And then she did one more thing. Something even Daniel didn't expect. She referred the case to state tax authorities for further review based on irregularities in how the funds were reported and disguised. No gasps, no objections, just the sound of a legal system quietly landing a very real punch. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still, like something in my chest finally stopped vibrating. My mom didn't say a word. She sat rigid, staring at a fixed point somewhere behind the judge. My dad looked like he'd been carved out of wax. Mallory didn't come back into the courtroom after recess. As we left, Daniel handed me a printed copy of the ruling in a slim folder. "You did what most people wouldn't," he said. "You held them accountable, and in the one place they couldn't manipulate." Outside the building, the city looked exactly the same. The sidewalk didn't care. Cars still honked. A guy in a hoodie was selling hot dogs 10 feet from the entrance. But I felt different, like I'd just walked out of somewhere I'd been trapped in for a very long time. Lauren hugged me. She never hugs clients, apparently, but she said this one made her mad enough to break protocol. We didn't go for drinks. There was no celebration dinner. Just quiet and space and a weird kind of peace that comes from knowing something wrong is finally legally defined as what it is wrong. The repayment didn't come in one lump sum. That was never going to happen. But the process started immediately. The house went up for sale. The lake place got listed. Assets began liquidating. The court-assigned trustee now oversaw the transfers. Everything passed through formal review. My parents had to report to a stranger every week about money they once treated like an invisible extension of their lifestyle. Their lawyer tried to negotiate a payment plan with lower interest, and the trustee shut it down in one sentence. "You don't get a discount on integrity." I never spoke to my parents again. They didn't reach out. No apology, no explanation, just silence. And honestly, that felt cleaner than whatever script they would have come up with. Mallory emailed me one line a few weeks later. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I started getting letters from strangers. People who'd found the case online connected it to a post I'd made months ago under a throwaway account and wanted to share their own stories. Some were small, $5,000 here, $12,000 there. Some were massive. A woman whose uncle drained her college fund to invest in a wellness resort. A man whose mom spent his inheritance on a luxury kitchen remodel and then claimed she was entitled to it for raising him. Same pattern, different family. They all ended their messages the same way. "Thank you for saying something. I thought I was alone." I wasn't. And I wasn't quiet anymore. Meanwhile, my account started to shift, slowly, steadily, one payment at a time. The first check came from a forced liquidation of a rental property I didn't even know my parents owned. The second came from an art collection. The third from a brokerage account. Each time I saw a balance change, I stared at it for a minute before closing the app. I didn't go on shopping sprees. I didn't buy anything ridiculous. I paid off the last of my loans, cleared every credit card, canceled old recurring charges I'd been afraid to touch. I kept receipts not for proof, but because I wanted to see what freedom actually looked like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was a balance of zero on things that had followed me for a decade. It was opening my fridge and knowing I could buy what I wanted. It was getting gas without checking my bank account first. It was the absence of panic. It was mine. The day the final transfer hit my account, I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone. I just stared at the balance for a while, hands resting on the kitchen counter, until I finally took a breath that didn't feel like it had a weight on it. Then I turned off my phone, made a sandwich, and ate it standing up quiet, simple, normal. The court-appointed trustee sent a confirmation letter that everything had been repaid in full, including interest with liens discharged and all closing documentation complete. He attached a line that made me laugh out loud. "You are now the sole financial authority on all remaining assets." As if I hadn't been earning that role since the day I learned what an overdraft fee was. The money didn't fix anything inside me, not exactly. It didn't give me back the years I spent double-checking every bill or skipping dinners because payday was still 4 days away. But it did something better. It proved I hadn't been crazy. I'd been right. I used part of it to move into a one-bedroom apartment near the base. Nothing fancy, clean, safe, quiet. No roommates, no mold in the bathroom, no hidden fees, just a key that belonged to me. Then I called the same financial advisor the court used. I told him I wanted something boring, stable, and untouchable. We put together a plan that included index funds, a little in bonds, and a few short-term accounts for flexibility. He asked if I wanted to invest in real estate. I said no. I'd had enough of property drama for a lifetime. I named the account folder Reality, just that, because that's what it felt like. A version of my life that finally lined up with how hard I'd worked and how little I'd asked for. A few weeks later, I was invited onto a podcast. Not a flashy one, just a small show run by a nonprofit that helps victims of family financial abuse. They'd read about the case and connected it to the Reddit thread I'd posted back when this was still just a glass clinking in my head. I said yes. I showed up, answered every question, and said the words out loud that used to feel impossible. My parents stole from me. I took them to court. I won. Not to shame them, not to hurt them, but because staying silent was the part that always let it keep happening. The podcast went semi-viral. A few local reporters picked it up. I kept things factual, didn't name names beyond the legal documents, but I didn't hide either. And when people messaged me to say they were dealing with something similar, I started tracking the patterns. Different faces, same script. It wasn't just about the money. It was about power, control. The idea that you don't get to say no to family even when they're bleeding you dry. So I started something. A small fund, nothing huge. Just enough to cover the cost of one-time consultations with lawyers or forensic accountants for people who needed help asking the right questions. I called it the Clear Line Fund because that's what I needed, one clean, unquestionable line between what's yours and what isn't. I got an email from Aunt Becky the day I launched it. It just said, "You're doing what I wish I had the guts to do 20 years ago. I'm proud of you." That one I printed and taped inside the back of my notebook. My parents downsized. Word got around that they sold the house and moved into a smaller condo. My dad took on consulting work for some niche finance firm. My mom started doing part-time admin at a community center and told people it was a lifestyle shift. I didn't follow up. I didn't gloat. Their consequences were happening with or without me. Mallory moved in with her boyfriend in another city. She hasn't reached out since the email that said I didn't know how to fix it. I never replied, and I never had to wonder if I was being too harsh. That was the freedom no amount of money could buy, knowing I could set the boundary and not explain it. People sometimes ask if I've forgiven them. I don't have a neat answer. I don't think about them every day. I don't wish them harm. I just don't give them real estate in my decisions anymore. And that for now is enough. When Grandma passed away the following spring, she left me her house. She also left a handwritten note in a sealed envelope that said, "Thank you for not letting them rewrite your story." I sold the house, not out of spite, but because I didn't want to live inside anything built on that much history. I used a piece of it to fund Clearline for another 3 years. The rest went into the same portfolio the trustee helped me build. No detours, no back doors, no family signatures. A few nights later, I opened a blank page and started drafting the intro to a workshop I'd been asked to lead something simple, something practical. I wrote, "You are allowed to ask where the money went. You are allowed to want receipts. You are allowed to say no even to people who changed your diapers or paid for your braces. Silence doesn't keep peace. It just keeps secrets." I sat back, looked at the words, and finally closed the laptop without flinching. Naomi's story isn't just about $3.5 million, a courtroom victory. It's about breaking the trap called family duty when it's been twisted into quiet exploitation. A lot of people are taught to stay silent to keep the peace, but Naomi proved that real peace only begins when you draw a clear line. Money can be earned back, but dignity once stolen cost even more to recover. She didn't choose drama. She chose cold, precise justice, the second sharpest weapon a soldier can carry. If you've ever felt like you were the one expected to sacrifice so others could thrive, or if it simply brings you satisfaction to see the greedy pay what they owe, you're in the right place. This channel is all about real stories from the shadows of family betrayal and the quiet fight for power, dignity, and revenge. Don't just watch and sit with the frustration. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. We're going deeper into the places where family is 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 the places